Welcome to Soul Therapy. I'm Katie.
And I'm Kate, and this is the space where we take a deep breath, dive into healing, and laugh a little along the way.
Think of this as your cozy corner for exploring how to feel better, grow stronger, and live with more ease.
We'll chat about everything from practical tools to soulful insights, all designed to help you connect with yourself and navigate life's ups and downs.
We've put together this Soul Therapy session series to help you to come back into alignment.
By alignment, we mean living with expression of your true self and values, feeling centered and grounded in yourself, and with an inner peace, trusting in the flow of life and your role within it.
So listen along and join in with the exercises, and let us know how you get on. Ready?
Let's do this.
Welcome to another session of Soul Therapy. I'm Katie.
And I'm Kate, and today we're talking about our connection with society.
So, our connection with society is kind of interesting, isn't it? Because we all seek and desire this connection outside of ourselves with something greater, but we kind of lose control at that point, or it can feel like we're definitely losing control.
Yeah.
So it can be a bit of a frightening thing to then step into our connection with society.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think we can try to over control it, or we can turn around and just relinquish control entirely and feel like we've got no control over our interaction.
And then sometimes we let society control us through what's normal societal expectations. And with that control, we tend to give our power and energy away to outside sources rather than holding it within ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Giving that power away is something that I think is really common. It's something I definitely did in the past. But the feeling I had at the time when I gave that power away was the feeling that it was taken from me. I didn't have a feeling of giving it away. I had a feeling of somebody taking or certain elements of society taking it from me, or like I never had it to start with.
And that's interesting, right? Because we think we're not agreeing to it, and we actually are. Like, we do choose to give our power away. And like, the first thing that came to my mind was working for other people, working for a company. Like, when I worked in a corporate job, I was giving my power away all the time, not realize that it was something that I was consciously doing. I was choosing to give my power to them by agreeing to show up for work every day, by agreeing to the schedule that they gave me, by agreeing to the pay they gave me. And when I look back, I realized those were all instances of me giving my power away. And I was wondering why I wasn't enjoying it, why I didn't feel free, why I felt frustrated, why I felt anxious.
Yeah, and absolutely. And it's also, we can then choose and see if we want to give that power away in that way. So when I used to work at universities, I had to take my holiday during the university holiday times, even though I was working year round. And, on one hand, I could look at that and see the flights were a different price and this kind of thing, and think to myself, oh, that's annoying that I can't just take my holidays whenever. But at the same time, there was a little bit of me that recognized that, well, as long as I'm going to work in universities, this is probably the way it's going to be. And I think that's the same for many people who also work in schools. And that kind of thing.
So kind of choosing when it's okay to give your power away and maybe when you want to keep it. And I think that could relate a lot to values. When we decide, like, am I going to give my power away to this outside source, or is this something that is so near and dear to me and it's related to values, and I'm going to choose to not give my power away and keep it for myself. So it's kind of finding that balance.
But it's first initially that recognition that it's not actually being taken from you.
Right.
The society we live in is not a prison unless we're in prison. But there is a difference between that, and just being able to bear in mind that within that society, we actually still exist within choice.
Yes.
In every situation.
Definitely. Yeah. And that reminds me of a quote I read where it's like, the only prison we live in is the one we create within our mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
So I think sometimes then, people can talk about, oh, I can't do this and I can't do that and I can't do the other. And it can really just be about reframing the language, because it wasn't the case that I couldn't go on holiday during term time.
Exactly.
The choice would have been,
yeah.
did I want to change my job
Mm-hmm.
in order that I was able to travel during term time? The recognition that the choice was mine to stay in the job, the choice was mine to stay under that requirement to take my holidays.
It's true. Yeah. And how often do you hear people say, I can't do this, I can't do that? And it's like, hold on, stop. You can, but you're choosing not to, because if you choose to do that, it means that you're going to have to potentially change a job because you might lose yours. Right.
So
and sometimes it
values.
is. Yeah. And sometimes it's just that recognition of like, you do have a choice, and people get stuck in this idea that they don't have a choice. And when people get stuck in this idea that they don't have a choice, it makes them feel less and less in control, and that alone can lead to actually so many mental health issues. Right, like that feeling of, there's been a lot of studies done on this, where people simply feeling like they have control over a situation impacts their level of anxiety.
Yeah.
Right. And it's literally something we all just create in our mind. Like we always have a choice.
Right. But there is this kind of essence of learned helplessness where when people are maybe as children presented with the idea that they don't have a choice, and then they carry on in a progressive way in society, and they just never really recognize that choice is theirs, that freedom is theirs.
Exactly, because it's been so ingrained in us, right?
It's a little bit like, there's that classic story of the elephant that's very small,
just
tied
thinking
to
about
a post,
that. Yes,
right? With a little small chain around its leg because it's only small and it's trying to get away. But then as the elephant grows, the chain is always small and the post is always small, stuck in the ground. So eventually the elephant's got so much strength
it can just walk
to break
away.
Free, but it doesn't.
Exactly.
Because it's learned it's helpless.
Yeah, or the chain just broke off because the elephant grew and it doesn't fit its foot anymore, but it doesn't realize that it's actually free to walk away. And I think so many people in society are like that as well, is like they've taken what they've learned as children and embodied it as being the ultimate truth and the ultimate reality, and not realizing just because that was the reality for them, there's multiple different realities that they can create based on their thoughts.
And this is the interesting thing about society, because society itself is an agreed construct. So there are a lot of elements of it that aren't truly, as we would think of in a kind of physical and scientific sense, real at all.
Yeah,
and so, something like gravity is real. Even before we could explain it, before we knew what it was real, because if you dropped something, it fell. It wasn't that before we discovered gravity, things went upwards when you dropped them, on planet Earth, that's the way it worked, right?
Exactly.
And so, but there are other kind of constructs that don't really have that physical premise behind them that holds true. And so they're completely a construct of our agreed society. They're a myth that we've agreed to hold true.
Literally. And it's interesting to put it as like they're a myth, because it's like they're a false reality. Like it doesn't, they don't have any meaning or power other than the meaning and power that we give them.
Absolutely. Really, that's a really beautiful way to present that, because and then it doesn't mean that we should always necessarily discount these agreed myths, because sometimes they've come up because we've structured them in order to make life simpler or better for ourselves. So money is an agreed myth. It's pieces of paper, or now pieces of plastic more often than not. Or digits moving around in a the kind of cyberspace realm. But we've done that so that we don't have to be exchanging apples for bread all the time. And if we have apples and we want bread, and the bread person doesn't want the apples, then we can still gain the bread. We've got something to exchange that retains a value. But it's an agreed myth, right? And so that's beneficial to us in many ways. But I think it's worthwhile to keep an eye on the fact that it is actually a myth. And to not get swept away and make it a reality. Because I think this is kind of the way we can idolize something that doesn't actually, in essence, exist for us.
Or getting caught up in kind of that mindset that, I need money to do this, because it can really take the creativity out of things, right? There's many things that you can do. Like, for example, I want to take a trip to blah, blah, blah. And people see, okay, well, I need money to do that. But they don't step away and they think, well, what are some other options? Maybe I could do a house swap.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe I can do pet sitting. Maybe I have a friend who lives there. Maybe I know someone who has property there. Like, people get so
maybe
caught
I can
up.
volunteer for an organization there, and then I'll just have to cover my flights over, and I'll have accommodation and food and everything sorted, because that's what I'll be doing, is I'll be exchanging my time for things there, so that it won't cost me as much. And that could be a valid experience that brings about even more with it.
Absolutely.
So sometimes our difficulties, I've always found this in relation to having less money than others maybe in life. I always found that having less money has been a driving force for me.
Yes.
It's driven me to actually put myself out there in a way that I perhaps wouldn't if I hadn't have needed to, in order to create ways to sustain myself.
Absolutely.
So in that way, it's beneficial.
It forces you to grow.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
It forces you to take risk, to take chances, to put yourself out there, to innovate,
to participate,
right? Whereas
connect.
like, I mean, I know everyone just says, oh, well, I would just like to have all the money in the world. But when you think about it, like, how is that going to help you grow and evolve as a person, right? Like, things feel so much more rewarding if you worked towards them. Right. And it's like they say, it sounds cliche how it's like, not about the destination, it's about the journey. But it really is. That's what builds character, and that's what makes us. It's not about the destination and all of a sudden waking up one day and having all this money, right? That's not what's going to help you evolve as a person. That's not going to help with your soul growth, with your character growth. It's literally the journey to getting there that is worth it, and that helps you grow as a person.
And I think that's how, in finding our path, our way to get there, our alignment with society and our connection, our way of interacting with society that's right for us as who we truly are. I think in that's where we can find our peace in our connections and in our societal way forwards. It doesn't mean that everything will be as we want it to be, and it doesn't mean that everything won't be. But it means that we'll find our peace in our chosen interaction.
Yeah, and we can literally feel like when we are in alignment or not in alignment, based on just what our feelings and body are telling us.
Yeah, there's a friction when we're not in alignment with society. There's this kind of friction and this I guess anger and this polarization that actually we're seeing all over the world right now. That kind of represents the idea of society being out of alignment and people being out of alignment with the society they've created and exist within.
Yeah, and I think like the more chaos there is, generally the more out of alignment you are, right? And that's reflected internally, which shows us our external world as well, right? Because it's like we can't have peace within and see chaos outside of us, or we can't have chaos within us and see peace outside of us, right? So it's remembering that the world really is a reflection of what's within us, and those can be good signs of whether we do feel like we are in alignment with larger society, but also with ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, my recognition of the signs of when I'm actually in alignment with society, when I'm living in alignment with my true self, and that whole thing is coming together as one kind of entity, is when things become synchronous, is when I feel I'm in a state of flow more and more often. And when I'm in that state of flow, when everything, and by that I guess I kind of mean by when everything is moving in a way that I don't feel like I'm struggling or having to drive it. It's just naturally coming. And so unfiltered, if you like, in a way. And so feeling that really is a sign for me that I'm existing and living in alignment. And as I do that, I find society sinks back in with me more. I get more flow back from society.
Definitely.
And this can be big things, kind of like work related or, large relationship, family related things. Or it can be something super small. It can be something as super small as me thinking to myself, oh, I need to pick up something from the supermarket,
and
or the shop on the corner, and just thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to drop around, I need to get that. And as I get there, I find that it's on discount.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
It's kind of something as small as that.
Yes.
As I start to notice that synchronicity and that flow,
Yes.
those things will creep up more and more and more often until I reach the point where literally everything I shop for is on discount. Literally everything I shop for is, you know, reduced
definitely.
down to ridiculously small amount.
Yeah. And things just, they start feeling easier, like you said, big or small. And then some bigger things is like maybe that opportunity that you've been wanting for work, like maybe someone emails you about a new opportunity.
Or you bump into someone when you're out.
Yeah, or you're out and you bump into someone, or, you know, you meet someone who knows someone and makes an introduction, right? It's like things just, you feel like the universe is working with you.
Yes,
or even for you, rather than against you.
Right? And isn't that just such a losing game when, you know, I've definitely had moments in my life, and I've certainly got people in my life and have met people who act as if the universe is against them. And they are against the universe.
Yeah.
And but that's a losing game, hey, because you're against the whole of life.
You're against yourself.
So stressful.
Yes.
So difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
But when you can get into that synchronous flow of actually it being you with the universe, it's together. You're actually working on together in a way that's best for everyone and everything. All of a sudden, just it feels like life is just so easeful, not necessarily easy all the time, but easeful. You feel like you're moving and flowing in a way that just is rewarding, is connected, it's nourishing.
Yeah, and you'll feel less anxious, right? Like mood wise, like your mood will feel more stable, you'll feel less anxious. And like my theory right now as to why the world is like so stressed and we're having all of these people who have severe mental health issues or just mental health issues in general is because they aren't going with the flow of life. They're giving away their control to these, you know, outside sources, and that is triggering so much anxiety within the masses because they're just giving their control away without even realizing that they're doing it.
And it's realizing that we're giving our control away to things that in essence are fabricated by either ourselves or a previous kind of, you know, human societies. We've created this and we're existing within it. We're agreeing to exist within it. But if we give our power away to a myth, then that really is something that anybody else can twist in any way they want.
Right.
And I guess I can understand how then people can feel very much like they're out of control. And that can bring about fear. That kind of threatens our innate desire for safety and stability.
Right.
To feel that we've given this away to something that we don't necessarily understand, and we can't always understand it because it's maybe fluctuous, because it's not actually real. It can't be. It's not based on a solid foundation of if I hold it up and drop it, it will fall.
Absolutely.
A physical premise.
Yeah, and that need of like safety is like such a core need, like that need of feeling safe, right? And then when you give that power away to someone else to make you feel safe, and like you said, it's kind of all a construct anyways. It's like that feeling within us, like it's like no wonder you're not feeling stable, no wonder you're not feeling secure. It's because you're in that mindset of like you don't feel safe, and it's almost like the cycle that a lot of people don't realize.
Yeah, and I think it's just really interesting to, within our belief systems, be able to identify these constructs and illusions. I'm not at all saying that we shouldn't exist within them. Money is very useful if you want to travel without, you know, having had to grow, you know, 300 bushels of apples to buy a ticket. You know, it's very useful to us. But the thing is that we're keeping an eye on the idea that these things are constructs.
Yes.
So when you're traveling, get the right visa for the country you're going to. But keep in mind that actually country boundaries are a construct that we have created. And so obviously anything like flooding, fire, things like that doesn't obey country boundaries.
Right.
And the reason for that is because they are a human creation.
Exactly. And they actually do exist. Right. And that's like a good way to compare it. It's like those things are real. They literally, they aren't illusions. Right. And you can see that they aren't, because they don't abide by the rules. You know, they don't care who's in the way or who's not in the way, or they don't care that it's a border along the country that doesn't even exist.
Yeah, working in large animal science in the marine world, you know, these marine megafauna animals, they roam all across the ocean. They don't worry about whose coastline it is. They're going around to the Arctic, the Antarctic, and up to the tropics, and they're not worrying about who owns whatever
They're
section.
much more free in the ocean. Maybe that's why I love the ocean so much. That's why I want to be a mermaid.
And the ocean's moving from place to place. It doesn't mind who's owning each shore it laps against. That's very true. But it does have impact, of course. These kind of constructs that we live within, they do have impact on us. And we do agree to live within them. So it's something that we need to feel as if, and we are able to feel as if we are a functional part of, rather than it's something that's being held over us, rather than it's a structure that's been forced upon us. I think it's something that we're able to more so choose our lives within.
How can we work with it? And again, how can we flow with it rather than against it?
And recognizing that choice, like recognizing, first of all, it's recognizing what is real and what is an illusion. And even in just the recognition and just the knowing, that can be quite freeing. Because, you know, that's that idea. You might be jumping through loops to get a visa for the country. But at the same time, you're kind of recognizing the lightness that comes with that. And it just may be coming up with another plan. If it doesn't come through, I could go to, I've wanted to go to do this, so I can go somewhere else. So I can, you know, this will happen for me in the future. And just kind of letting that ease kind of come in with it. Not easy, but easeful.
Exactly.
And then also like just rethinking it. You know, if we can find these constructs in our belief systems, we can actually identify them and then recognize, hang on, is this working for me?
Right. Yeah. And that idea of like recognizing where our belief systems come from, right? So like identifying some of these core beliefs that you have about the world and being like, wait, where did they actually come from? Right. And you'll probably realize, you know, they've gotten passed down to you, right? And realizing like they're actually not ultimate truths. They're just stories that have been passed down from generation to generation, right?
Well, handed out by the media is the common kind of,
and the media.
Handed out by the media, handed out by schools, handed out by institutions.
Right? And like it's kind of it's all connected, right? Because like the institutions influence us at the individual level, and the individual level, you know, influences the institutions because we feed into them and we constantly give them more and more power, right?
Yeah, of course. And obviously there's that construct as well where as an institution itself runs under its own kind of energy, its own power. And much like individuals, it has a survival focus at the basis. And so that institution itself wants to survive. And so actually it's not going to do anything that risks the bringing about of its own downfall. And so maintaining the status quo, or in fact, you know, amplifying its own power is kind of the food and the logic of an institution. But that doesn't necessarily mean we have to be threatened by that if we can recognize that that's the case.
Yeah, and again, having that self-awareness and learning like how can I work with these institutions that kind of shape society right now, which again is like a very masculine energy. Institutions in itself, because they're very like when I think of an institution, it's like something that's grounded. It's solid. It's not flowing. It's not going anywhere, right? So it's like, how can I work as, you know, a society and a part of this society as someone who can kind of flow with the institutions without letting them control me? And I think finding that balance.
And helping institutions really from within actually as well in some ways, from outside, from inside, just helping with that idea of actually creating that progressive change, creating that potential to flow. because institutions, although they have always existed as those grounded set structures, there's nothing to say that we can't bring in the new. And in fact, if we want to create in the future something that's never existed in the past, all we can do, the only way forwards, is to bring in the new that has never existed before.
Absolutely.
And so bringing this kind of flow to what once was a very stable and steady and kind of unchanging entity is actually perhaps the path forwards.
Absolutely. And the thing with institutions is they're so powerful because we all give our power away to them, right? So the moment that people start taking back their power, a response to that is going to be the power of institutions go down.
Right, yeah. I mean, it happens in an instant. When you think to yourself, you know, and working for yourself, you do your tax return, you know, kind of thing. And when I changed my mindset from thinking to myself, oh, I have to do this because they're making me, to I'm going to engage with an accountancy firm to do this to the best of my ability because I'm choosing to work for myself. When I started to see it from a slightly different perspective, my interaction with it changed and my own energy around it changed. And all of a sudden, I was choosing to create a life for myself wherein I paid them tax this way. I wasn't doing it because they were forcing me to. So the way I was looking at that had really created a struggle for myself versus reframing it within myself and managing to create actually a real feeling of freedom around doing it. I mean, yes, okay, you're paying out money. Is that something you want to do? Not always. But do I want to live that way in which that's a part of that lifestyle? Yes.
Yeah. It's all about perspective, isn't it? How we view kind of these institutions of power as well. Like you said, like once you change your perspective and how you saw and worked with that institution, it impacted your internal state, right? And you were able to shift and see it in more of a positive way rather than a negative way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, really, it's really possible for us to choose our interactions with society and with all the elements of society that way. Definitely. I think so. And maybe part of that is recognizing how institutionalized we can become existing within these structures. These structures that maybe find it easier to deal with us and administrate us when we aren't seen as the individuals we are. Maybe it's easier to motion us around in groups.
Definitely.
But actually, just because that's easier for them, that doesn't make us a homogenous mass. If they want to see us that way, well, that's the perspective of the institution. And if people want to join and have that perspective themselves, that's theirs. But we don't have to take that on. There's something that kind of gave me a fresh view on the world when I recognized that a version of me exists in the eyes of everybody, and I'm not responsible for that version. I don't have to take that on. So if they want to see me that way, that's fine. That's their version of me that they want to see. Doesn't make that who I am.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like what we spoke about in past sessions, right, is like this idea that people project their own belief systems and how they see the world onto others, right? So yeah, the version that people develop of other people is more of a reflection of them and their own belief systems than anything else, right? And I think it's important as well to remember that, because that can help us break into freedom too, is like realizing that people are going to see you in so many different ways and none of it is actually the truth, right? And like, so not to let that control you, right? Or not to let it really get to you, that feeling of judgment, because it's like, it's all just a reflection of those other people. It says more about them than it ever will about the person that they're judging.
That's very true. Right. Creating that space so we can just take a breath. And we can allow ourselves to recognize what is real about this situation
and what
isn't. And what is mine and what is someone else's.
It makes me like, it reminds me of The Matrix, like the movie The Matrix, and like stepping out of the Matrix, right? And when he does, it's like you see how everything was such a false illusion, right? Like it only exists in this dimension, but when you step out of it, it's like it doesn't exist. And then a lot of it, they only exist because of the power that we give to them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right?
It's that kind of freedom of that ability to, within yourself, choose your interaction.
Yes. And how we want to interact with it. And then that acknowledgement of how that shapes how we show up every day in the world as individuals as well. Right?
Yeah, it does. I think that one of the things that people can do to kind of start to feel that and start to really make that change within themselves is to actually notice their own belief systems and notice how many of them are maybe connected to things that are real versus things that actually are myths, constructs, or illusions. So they are societally real, but actually in the physical sense, they don't necessarily exist. As we talked about countries,
exactly,
you know, these kinds of things, they societally exist, but is as in a physical sense, in a geographical sense, they don't exist. The animals will range between one to the other,
absolutely,
without boundary, as long as there's no fence put
exactly there. Right. And it really shows us very much a human response, because like you said, animals don't recognize a lot of the constructs that we do. Right. I mean, like when we have a property, we let our dog out and we want the dog to stay on our property. Dogs have no sense of that. They'll be running through people's yards, they'll be running across the road, like they don't have an idea of, well, this is mine and that's yours. It's just, it doesn't exist in their world.
And I think it relates back to our safety and security. We do that because we want to feel that we're creating permanent safety and security. But of course, that's an illusion too.
That's an illusion too.
There is no permanent safety and security. But in that, it's possible for us to recognize perhaps that if we can't be permanently safe and secure, then actually we are dynamically safe and secure in every single moment.
Exactly.
And that for me is really true freedom. It's not having a fence around an area of land and that being mine that I can stake forever.
Exactly.
It's finding dynamic safety and security within my self-trust to provide somewhere to be for myself.
For sure. And that's when you become an unshakable human being, when you find that within yourself. Because, you know, living in the house with the gates all around it, realizing that in a moment, all it takes is a tornado, an earthquake, a flood, and that's gone. Fire, look at the fires in California, right? It's 1 minute people have homes, the next they don't. Like it is such a false sense of security. And if we don't learn to cultivate that within ourselves, and we think we have it in our external environment, when something like natural disasters hit the world, and as you see it, they go into a tailspin because so many people don't have that within themselves, that I have freedom no matter what situation I'm in. I mean, obviously it's a terrible situation to be in, and that's going to shake anyone, even if they do have a solid core. But it's that recognition that you can have that within yourself, and it doesn't have to be reflective of things that can just be taken away from you.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is sometimes where I'm seeing a generational divide go as well, is that I'm seeing this kind of the affiliation or strong founded beliefs and sticking to societal constructs being a factor of maybe slightly older generations, and that may be an outcome of things like war. Whereas I'm seeing younger generations really recognizing that the environment is more a true boundary, or is a true kind of defined physical characteristic. It's real. Whereas these false constructs that we've put in place, sometimes while they may sometimes be helpful, that doesn't necessarily make them real in the face of something like fire or flooding.
Exactly.
And you can see our constructs falling apart as well when you look at those things, because obviously insurance companies entitle all those ecological disasters acts of God, so in which case they don't pay out for them. So this is actually kind of, it folds under our construct of perpetual safety and security and ownership, and support of that via insurance of it, which is a secondary facet to owning it and insuring it.
Yes.
But then actually there's a loophole where you can fall through because it was never real.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's one situation where people give their power away, right? So the more we can learn to take our power back through identifying, looking at our belief systems, and potentially to identify the belief systems is to ask, like, what have I been told? Like, what are principles that I live by? So, for example, in order to feel safe, I need to have this big home, or in order to feel secure, I need to have a gate around my home, right? Or like all of these beliefs and thoughts that we have, and really looking at them and asking, okay, what is a construct? What is something that was passed down to me from my parents? And what is the actual truth of all of these? And once we're able to, identify those belief systems, then it's looking at, okay, and how can I tell a different story now, right? How can I reframe the story to better suit the life I want to live and to take back my power?
Yeah, what is it that society has told me I must create?
Yeah.
And what do I actually want to create?
Yes.
What is it that people around me have created that we're told will make me feel safe versus what will make me feel safe?
Yeah, or what will make you happy?
Happy, yeah,
right?
exactly.
That's a big one too.
Yeah, because happiness is kind of a dynamic thing that we're following and creating constantly as we go. It's not something that we can buy or something that we can actually reach a checkpoint on a list of boxes that we've bought this many things or we've acquired or gained this many things. Now we're happy.
Right.
It doesn't work quite like that.
Right.
So yeah, but I mean, there's also the real things within us where, based upon maybe past issues, we might actually really feel safer and supported if we have something.
Right.
So it's working within that as well, and maybe delving a bit deeper and understanding where these requirements came from. Where did my requirement come from to be able to lock a door?
Right. Yeah.
Is that something that's been trained into me, or is that something that I would really feel desperately unhappy with if I couldn't do? And if so, why? And is there a way I can work with that to feel and understand where that's come from?
Yes.
And are we creating more of this feeling of unrest and unsettlement and kind of insecurity in life?
Yeah.
Or are we creating less of it?
Right.
Because are we just putting more and more and more locks in front of ourselves?
Right.
Or are we actually solving the underlying problems?
Of why we're doing it.
Of why we feel the lock needs to be there in the first place.
Exactly. And that's kind of like that false prison that we can live in.
Yeah, exactly.
Literally a false created prison.
Yeah. So I think it's really about people just recognizing these kind of false constructs or these illusions that exist within their own belief systems, and recognizing the ones that they don't want to interact with so much anymore.
Yeah.
And maybe finding a new way to interact or a new belief system for themselves that is more aligned with their own goals, their own values, their own purpose in life.
Exactly.
And then not just recognizing that and replacing that in their framework.
Yeah.
Actually taking a few steps towards it on a day-to-day basis.
Taking action.
Yeah, taking some action. Absolutely.
Yeah, because sometimes that's, the first step to change is literally taking action and moving in a different direction than what you're moving in, right? So it's like once you create a new belief system, do something that's going to reinforce that, because you literally have to carve new pathways in your mind.
Absolutely. Right? And there can be a lot of peace found in that as well, in just taking one after another single steps towards what we want to be.
Absolutely. And then you realize that it actually isn't so scary after all.
Yeah,
right?
You're creating a new habit.
Again, and then again, it was like all just an illusion, right? Like that illusion that you had of fear that you couldn't do it, and you realize you can, and then you're like, oh wow. It's like that idea of like when you walk on the way appears, like things just start happening and appearing for you.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. You didn't need to know all that was coming next. You just needed to take the next step. And that's the difference between this kind of idea of living in fear is that you need to know everything that's coming and secure everything that's ever been.
Yeah.
Which is utterly impossible.
Yeah.
Versus living in kind of with driven by love and faith, which is that you actually will step forwards into a trust and a connection, and you and the universe together in harmony, rather than you against the universe and against everyone else.
And being in alignment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, perfect. Thank you for joining us for this session of Soul Therapy.
And we look forward to seeing you in the next one.
Thanks for joining us. We'd love to connect with you live in our group sessions.
Join our online membership to spend weekly group sessions with us, where we will be talking about topics such as depression, anxiety, burnout, relationships, family problems, and addictions, as we work with you to develop your health and well-being.
In addition, this includes access to a private Telegram group, weekly actionable exercises with guaranteed general feedback from us. The 12-week membership comes with an exclusive offer of reduced price one-to-one sessions with us for the duration of the 12-week membership.
A lot can change in 12 weeks. Come and join us and jump into the life you choose.
Remember that to get the most out of these soul therapy sessions, whether the free podcast series or the membership, we advise full participation in all the suggested exercises.
Throw yourself into this fully and become the you that you have always dreamed of being. We have linked 2 meditations for you to enjoy as you wish. One is a sleep meditation, which you can put on playing at low level as you get into bed and will continue for 8 hours as you sleep deeply. The second is an ancient connecting meditation dating from around 1000 AD that cultivates a better world for ourselves and for all by reaching out and supporting others, and in doing so, recognizing our own power to contribute to making chosen change on whatever scale we want. You can perform this meditation in any pose you choose or that feels right for you, including laying down.